Slow Living. I'm Esther, and in this video I will show you how I flipped this thrifted knit. I didn't do a massive flip on it, but I did make it nice and fitted so that it looks kind of smarter and a bit more classic. It fits me really well now, whereas before it was very oversized and maybe a little bit outdated. I've seen quite a few of these polo style knits coming back in, so I think they're going to be really big this winter, and I'm in Australia, so next winter for me. But for a lot of you, you're going into the colder seasons now, and I think you'll be seeing these everywhere. But this is the kind of trend that is quite classic, and I don't think it'll be like going in and out and in and out, that kind of thing. So I think I'll get a lot more wear out of this, even over the next few years and the next few seasons. So in this video, I will show you how I basically just made it a little bit smaller through the sides, through the sleeve, and through the shoulder. Let's get started.
Okay, this is the top that I bought from Savers. Like I said, it was actually sized large, which is pretty crazy because it's definitely not a large. Having said that, I think someone shrunk it in the wash. My husband Tim actually found it in the men's section, and it definitely is not a men's size large. It has a few holes in it, as you can see here. I think there were 2 or 3 holes in total, and because it's wool, that's not really surprising. You know, those stupid moths like to eat wool if you don't take care of it and hide it. That is a pretty common thing, but thankfully you can easily darn holes, and I will show you how to do that in this video as well. Otherwise, I have another video where I show you how you can darn socks and other garments and things like that. This is how it fit before I did anything to it, and honestly, I probably would wear it like this. I wear a lot of my clothing oversized, so I really didn't mind this fit, but the look that I was going for was something a little bit more smart so that I could actually wear it out of the house, maybe dress it up a little bit, because that front placket is really the feature of the top, and it's done so beautifully. It's an all-in-one placket, so it means that the whole piece was knitted together with the top, and I don't see many done like that these days, so it's really nice to find a vintage top that has that. The jumper does have a little bit of pilling on it, but that will be easy enough to remove with the lint remover. Alright, so to begin adjusting any garment, you try it on, and if possible, you can try it on inside out, because that's how you can see where all the seams are, and also how to achieve the best kind of fit. It would also be useful to have a tape measure, so what I'm going to do is sort of measure this against my shoulder. I'm going to take up that shoulder seam by approximately 2 inches. I'm going to take it in around the body. Again, I think roughly 2 inches each side. I'll have a play with that, and then also play with the underarm seams. So try your top on and take little measurements, note them down, because that's the easiest way to make adjustments later on. You can also adjust the length. Just make note of how much length you would like to take off from your top. So now it's time to find where the existing seams in your garment are. As you can see on my top, that sleeve seam is one that I'm going to alter and I'm going to change. So I'm going to cut that off. Be very careful to cut as closely as you can along that seam. If you can see that it's a seam that can be unpicked, then it's probably a good idea to unpick it instead of cutting, because you'll lose a bit of fabric in the process. Now, importantly, before you start to cut anything to your size, make sure you remember to leave seam allowance. So I always leave at least 1 centimeter seam allowance. You can leave a little bit more if you want to be careful, because it means that in case you've cut your top too small, you've got a little bit of room to sort of make it a little bit bigger before you make any more mistakes. So now, using the measurements that you noted down when you tried your garment on, you can use pins or you can use chalk to start to sort of draw in where your new seams are going to be. Do this 1 seam at a time, and then you can actually use the piece that you cut off to flip over to the other side of your garment to trace around that and make sure that you're taking off even bits of your garment from the left and the right side. After doing the armholes, I then moved on to the hem. I think I wanted to take it up about 2 centimeters or something like that. But again, remember before you cut to leave enough room for your seam allowance. Generally, a seam allowance for your hem is roughly 1 inch. So make sure that you leave about 1 inch or about 2 to 3 centimeters so that you can fold that over at the end and finish off your hem nicely. And now the last part on the bodice to adjust is the side seam. So again, mark it with pins, give it a little snip and take away a little bit of fabric from the side seam to make it smaller. Now, because we took some away from the side seam and because we took some away from the shoulder, that means that our sleeve is no longer going to fit. So we're going to take off a little bit from the bottom of the sleeve seam. So because I'm overly confident when I do my alterations, I sort of just get in there and I chop away at things. I would recommend that you actually measure your armhole. So you want to match the head of your sleeve to the length of your armhole. And then again, you can trace that off with your other sleeve to make sure that they are both the same. So then to begin sewing, we're going to sew back those seams. So even though we're using knit garments that are stretchy, we can just use a straight stitch because this kind of seam doesn't require the seam to be stretched. The only thing that we need to use a zigzag or an overlocker or serger, cover stitch, that kind of thing for is the hem. You can overlock it if you want your seams to look nice and neat, but I kind of just left mine open because I'm lazy and because they will not come undone. The next part to sew is the sleeve back to the bodice. So match the top of your sleeve head to the shoulder seam on your bodice, and then you can match the underarm seam of your bodice to the underarm seam of your sleeve. That way you can try and distribute your seam nice and evenly, and then it'll make it a lot easier to sew around. As always, when you're sewing, make sure that your right sides are together and your wrong sides are on the outside. That means that all of your seams and things, when you are finished, will be hidden on the inside of your garment. And then the last thing to finish is the side seam of the bodice. You can also use a straight stitch for that. And most of your top should be pieced together again. I'm going to give my top a bit of a press, but then the last thing to do is to finish the hem. So I left 1 inch of seam allowance at the beginning when I cut my hem, so that's how much I'm going to fold it over. I then pin it in place, and then you use the iron to press it down so that it's nice and flat. So for this hem, you need to use a zigzag stitch or a cover stitch. So I like to use the stepped zigzag, which looks like this, and that basically means that you can stretch it out without breaking all of the stitches when you put your top on and off. Try not to stretch out your hem as you're putting it through the machine. Try to feed it through nice and slowly, and then you can always press it later on. Now, if your garment didn't have any holes, your top is basically complete, but mine had a few that I had to mend. So now I'm going to show you how I mended those using just a traditional darning technique. I popped that little darning mushroom underneath. The top should be inside out. Pop the darning mushroom on the inside, find some wool or some yarn that matches your garment, and then use I think it's a darning, well, mine's called a wool needle, and that just means that the end is not so pointy. And then you use the needle to pick up about every second stitch. As you can see here on my needle, you can see those little stitches. We're picking each one of them up, and then we're going to pull the needle through. You don't need to tie a knot or anything to finish it at the end. Just leave, I don't know, about 10 centimeters there so that you don't pull the whole thing through. And then you basically flip the garment around and you go back the other way. So you keep doing this, picking up every second or so stitch until you've completely covered your hole. I would recommend that you sort of start, I don't know, maybe 1/2 centimeter on either side of your hole so that it doesn't tear away from the sides. Once you've finished going in one direction, you basically turn it and go in the other direction. So using those bits of yarn that you just put in, pick up every second one, and then do exactly what you did the first time around, going in neat little lines to cover the hole. This is what it should look like when you're finished from the inside, and then when you flip it around to the outside, you can barely see it at all, and it looks quite neat and adds a lot of wear to your garment. I have 2 more holes to mend, so I will go ahead and do that, and then we will start getting rid of the pilling on the outside. This is my lint remover. If you've watched any of my other thrift flip videos, you would have seen it because I basically use it every time I get a knit from the op shop. It basically takes off that top layer of pilling that you see on lots of garments, whether they're wool or synthetics or anything like that. It's quite natural for pilling to occur. So using one of these lint removers really sort of gets rid of that, and it gives the garment a really fresh new look. And I'm all done.
So I hope you enjoyed this video. Once you learn the basics of pattern making, all the pieces that make up a garment, it makes it a lot easier to cut things up and put them back together again to make them fit you really well. So I hope that this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and also subscribe if you're into thrift flips, into secondhand shopping, maybe going into sustainable fashion, how to sew your own clothes, how to mend, that kind of stuff. This video was actually part of a thrift knit flip series that I'm doing. I basically bought about 7 or 8 garments secondhand from Savers for less than about $10 each, and then I basically thrift them to make them a bit more modern, to make them fit well, or just to change the style completely. These are really cool projects to take on. If you've got old clothes lying around, you can always upcycle them into a new style and give it a bit more wear before it ends up in landfill or even before it ends up at an op shop or a secondhand shop. I hope you enjoy these style of videos, and if so, let me know in the comments. I would love to know if you have any suggestions as well for any other types of videos related to sustainable style and fashion and making your own clothing that I might be able to help you with. Look forward to hearing from you and see you next time.